Today we're at the Love and Sorrow exhibition with the producer, Judith Penrose, and she's brought us to this part of the exhibition. Would you be able to tell us a little about this exhibit and what it means to you as the producer?
Sure, Beck. One of the things that we did with this exhibition was not back away from displaying confronting content, because the story is confronting and we wanted to convey that in a way that's still personal. So this part of the exhibition is an area where people choose to step in if they're willing to do so. And it's really focusing on the stories of facial injury and reconstruction. So for people who'd suffered horrendous injuries in the wartime, and the work that was done to give them some sense of life or even survival after that. And in here we display what are the facial casts and the medical documentation through the process of the work that was done at Sidcup to restore these faces of these men and give them some sense of life. So what's interesting here, for my point of view, is that we've shown what is phenomenally detailed and confronting content in an area where you can choose to engage with it. And the visitors who've been coming through are willing to take that on, which is great.
Yeah, because these items are very confronting, and there are items throughout the whole exhibition that are quite confronting, but it's really interesting the way they managed to create a space between the visitor of today and the ordeal that was the Great War in that aftermath period. And I think that 100 Stories does that as well. And you said that, you know, this is a particularly confronting space. Has any visitors complained that perhaps it's too confronting or too challenging? And
no.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, an issue that we come across as historians and museum curators, of whether you can indulge in the horror of war.
We spend a lot of time debating that, don't we, in the preparation for putting on a display, about what you choose to put in or not, where you draw that line and how far you go in telling the story. And I think we should never underestimate the visitor in what they're actually prepared to take on, and sometimes it's about how you unfold the story. So very much it's a deliberate decision as you come through the rest of the exhibition that you're starting to build up an intensity, and the emotional mapping that we've done through the exhibition space, the stories you encounter as you start to engage more and more and get more immersed in it, and very personal, so you feel like that person has just stepped away from that bit of story, or there's a contextual image to the background to those objects, but they're displayed in a way that's like you're almost there. And then here we've gone for the stark kind of hospital environment feel, so you know you're taking a moment out of that pathway for something a little more intense.
Yeah, to take the time to consider.
Yeah.
And you know, that's something we've come across with the 100 Stories. Every time we present it to the public, they're so open and so willing to engage with these challenging stories, which are really confronting and really difficult, but exactly, don't underestimate the public and the viewer and the visitor, because it's part of the war story.
And we get a lot of the feedback at the end, so we have ways to collect the responses from visitors. We also felt at the end of the exhibition, because it builds up in the intensity and comes back down to the final sort of emotional feel is resilience a little bit at the end, but also it's holding the memory. And then we know that at the end of going through an emotional journey like that, because it's only 200 square metres and that's a lot in here to take on, that we need to give visitors a chance to take a moment and reflect. And so we have our reflection space outside where they write comments and they write thank yous to the soldiers, or they write their feelings on the war, World War I or war in general, as that chance to take a moment. And then they're sharing a lot of fantastic feedback with us on that basis.
Imagine me fascinating.
Yeah.
Judith, would you be able to personalise this exhibition? Tell us about one of the men involved.
Absolutely, Beck. I think the story that's very strong in here as well is Bill Kearsey. He's one of the people who you meet in the journey through the rest of the exhibition. And in here, his story is absolutely the story of Sidcup, because he was wounded at battle near Glencorse in 1917. Incredible facial damage to him. And look, this incredibly good-looking soldier, when he headed off to war, went through the absolute trauma of the facial injuries. And then the work done at Sidcup to repair which is what's documented here, and the therapy work that he did while he was at Sidcup. He made it back from the war. He still had battles through the rest of his life with infections and general coping, but according to all the stories of the family, he was incredibly positive. He actually had great resilience. So even though his fiancée at the time when he went to war left him because he was injured, he later fell in love again and he married, and the end of his story is in the rest of the exhibition as well. So he lived through to 1971.
Overcoming, this terrible trauma of war. So really impressive to have the trauma and the resilience of that story.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of the MOOC. Thank you so much for your company. Thank you to our film crew, to Museum Victoria, and most of all, thank you to you for taking part.